Hello, I hope you're doing well today. My name is Ian Green and I'm the musician for Music Dreams and also for Ian J. Green. And today we're going to be working on part 8 of Unit 9 of a chapter on intervals. This helps to support the Intermediate Music Rudiments book by Mark Sarnecki, which is a great book for any students in the intermediate levels of any conservatory system. Specifically, I teach primarily out of the conservatory from the Royal Conservatory of Music. Their current syllabus is wonderful and it's really helpful for students to understand not just how to play music, but also how to understand the language of music. So today what we're going to do is do a little bit of an overview of the various topics within the larger topic of intervals. Just go over that just for a couple of minutes and then also work on some practice questions as well. So what I'm going to do is share my screen and then we can jump right in. If you're following along in this book, we are going to be on page 49. Now, as you may remember from previous lessons, we've spoken on what's the definition of an interval, which is the size or the space between two notes. Also, how we can have a melodic interval, which means that the notes are separated, but there's still a space between them, but a melodic interval would be like this, whereas a harmonic interval is more like this, where the notes are stacked on top of each other. Today in the homework questions that we'll be working on in just a moment, we are going to be looking at writing harmonic intervals. Then the next thing that you want to do is you want to count up from the bottom to the top, starting with the first note as number 1 and counting all the way through every line and space up to the top note to find the distance between the notes. And of course, different sizes, such as a sixth or a third or a fourth, will have a different spacing on the musical staff. You can write intervals in any clef, but primarily we are going to be working in treble clef and bass clef today. Next, what you want to do is look at the bottom note and consider the major scale of that bottom note. So thinking of the key signature of that bottom note, and then match it to the top note to see if it matches as either a perfect interval or a major interval. And then from there, you can adjust the top note to accommodate whichever type of interval you need to write. Now, in a few pages prior, and I will just scroll back a little bit to find that, a major interval can become smaller to turn into minor. A minor interval can become slightly larger by a half step and turn into major. You can also have augmented and diminished intervals, and you can also have perfect intervals. But when we want to invert an interval, a major interval will switch to the opposite minor interval, and vice versa. Minor intervals, when inverted, turn into major. Augmented intervals, when inverted, become diminished. Diminished intervals become augmented, and perfect intervals remain perfect. Now, the way that this works when we want to invert an interval is that you, first of all, figure out the size and the quality, so major, minor, etc., for the original interval. Then you take the notes and either draw the bottom note up an octave or the top note down an octave while keeping one of the notes the same, so that the notes are basically flipped in order. From there, then you can count and find the spacing of the new size between the two notes that have been switched, and you'll see how the quality will flip, and also the total number between the size of the first interval and the size of the inverted interval will equal 9. So that's a bit of a review there. Now today what we're going to be doing is going into a little bit more further detail on page 49 while writing intervals below a given note. That's a bit of a different topic that was also covered in part 7 of this tutorial series. Let's work on some of these together. So we're going to be using treble clef, and we're going to be using the note D for this first line. And we'll just do a couple of these, and then we'll work on a couple in the bass clef as well, just to give us enough time to accommodate some of this material. Now first what I'm going to do is count from D down 6 notes to find a sixth below D. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that gets us to F, So I'm going to draw an F here. Make this bigger so we can see. Now, I'll just make that a little neater. Now what we're going to do is now use the bottom note, as we've been trained to do, to figure out if this top note, which is the given note, which we can't change, is the same as the bottom note in matching the scale to match the type of interval. So of course, in a major scale, the major intervals are the second, the third, the sixth, and the seventh. And then perfect intervals are on the unison, fourth, fifth, and octave. So the way that this works is we have a major sixth here that we need to write. Now in the scale of F major, we have one flat, we have B flat. So the interval of a major sixth from F up to D is correct. We don't have to change anything. So that is a correct first answer. So we can even change colors and put a check mark. Okay, let's go to the next one. Switch back to blue. And now we're going to be finding a third first. So we start on D and we count down 3 notes. 1, 2, 3. So we're going to be drawing a B. And that is going to be the interval of a third away. But now we have to find if it is how to, this B is a bit tricky to draw. We want to then find if this, how to draw a minor third. So we would think about B and think of B major as the key signature first. And B major has 5 sharps, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp. So of course, a major third above B would be D sharp, but there's a D that's the given note. So we have to keep that note the same and change the bottom note if we need to. But we know that a third away from D is B, but also that a major third above B is D sharp. So therefore, if we were to look at the piano and then adjust the notes to match to make this into a minor interval, a major interval would be B to D sharp, but we don't have D sharp on the top of the interval. We have D. So that means by changing, going down a half step, the note that we actually wrote, B underneath, does form a minor interval above that note. So B to D is, in fact, a minor third. We don't have to change anything here. So that is helpful there. So we can go over here and put a check mark. Okay, so now let's go back to the blue and we'll do one more. So we're going to be on D. We're going to be counting down to a fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to have A. Now, here is one of the examples. The first couple of examples we worked on, we didn't have to change anything. We did all the processing and figured out the answer and then didn't have to change any notes. This one I think we might have to, though. Because if we look at the spacing between these notes, we have a fourth. And traditionally, fourths are perfect fourths in a major scale. So if we think about the notes that we drew here and then match this to the top note, the A major scale contains 3 sharps, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. But so the bottom note to the top note does match as a perfect fourth. But what we want to do is turn this into an augmented fourth. So what we have to do is actually make this interval larger, but we cannot change the top note. We have to change the bottom note. The given note, which is the top note, has to stay the same, in other words. So if we have A to D, we want to make that larger. We have to keep the D the same, but change the spacing by moving the A down. So now we have lowered that A down to A flat. And you can see here by doing that, it has adjusted that note. So I hope that this is not as confusing as it seems. It's actually not too tricky. The important thing you want to think about here is working on making sure to know first the size of the different intervals, the quality of what the intervals are in a major scale. And also, if you have to invert intervals, that's another topic, but that's also helpful too. Then, as well, when you have to write intervals below a given note, the given note is the top note, so we can't change that note, but you can change the bottom note. But in order to figure out what the correct size and spacing of an interval is, you still have to use the bottom note as a way to gauge, to match the type of question you'll be answering. So as you saw in that one that we just worked on, an augmented fourth required us to switch the A, which we found as the space below D, to an augmented fourth by lowering it to make that interval slightly larger. So something that is always handy to do is to use a piano or a keyboard or some kind of chart or something, so you can kind of use your pen or your pencil or your fingers to find the spacing between the notes to make sure that you're raising or lowering notes to create the correct size of the interval that you need to write. I hope this information was helpful. I look forward to seeing you next time for another tutorial, and until then, bye for now, and thank you for watching.